Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March meeting of the Riverfront Design Committee. First item is roll call, please.
Paul Dedman.
Present.
Anthony Blatt.
Here.
Kenny Dennis. Brian Doherty.
Here.
John Joyce.
Here.
Don Kasperite. Richie Split. David Yost. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next item of business is the approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was held on February the 6th of this year. You received a copy of the minutes in your packet. Does anyone have any comments, changes? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion for approval.
Motion to approve.
Moved by Mr. Blatt. Seconded by Mr. Doherty. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you. Item 3, cases withdrawn. There are none. Item 4, continuance requests. There are none. Item 5, consent docket. There are no items. Item 6, cases for individual consideration. 6A, case number SRCA-14-00002 at 800 Southeast 6th Street in the Regatta District. Is the applicant present? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
State your name, please.
Jeffrey Guston with S2O Design and Engineering.
Okay. Do you have any comments to add?
I don't. It's a continuance from last month. So
correct.
We've made the corrections to the drawings and submitted those for your review.
Okay, thank you. Scotty, do you have any comments from staff?
No, we've looked over the revisions and they comply with the ordinance, so we recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of the Commission have any comments or questions?
I just want to make a couple. I appreciate you all reviewing that and making some of the changes. You know, this is going to be such a high profile that we really want to be careful about the species. We're at Myriad Garden right now. We're getting requests from the Boys Trust to change plants that all species died of certain things because they were not adaptable. It's just a tough environment for some things. And I think there's still plants on here that are marginal. So as you start getting into those lindens that go around the parking lot, you know, they came from Iowa and planted a whole linden grove after the Murrah bombing, and none of those survived. And also, again, some of those can survive, but a lot of times it's in very specific microclimates. And also, I would really listen as the bids come in and be open to a few things like that, especially like the linden. I'm just not sure that that's going to go. And the caddo maple, if it's not in a super positive draining soil, it has no chance of living here. And you have a lot of those out there. So, you know, it's hard to tell how much of a slope they're on. And if they're on a real positive slope, they stand a better chance. But they're native out where it's just solid Caddo County sand. I mean, they just live in sand. So if you start putting them in any kind of a clay environment or anything, I don't know of any of them that have ever survived, even though they're a great tree for the climate. So I would just be aware of that. And I think just for the committee to know, I went back because part of the recommendations from staff was based on the recommendation of trees and plants for Oklahoma City, which is in the city clerk's office. So after the meeting last time, I thought, well, I'm going to go down there and try to find it. They couldn't find it for quite a while, and then they were able to pull it up, and it comes up on minutes of city council meetings. So then I pulled that into. It's a very comprehensive list with a lot of plants that are really questionable. We're always running into new diseases. We're always running into new climate type things. And it does say at the end of it, so this should be updated periodically and all, but there's plant material on there that is definitely plant material that we would not use today, probably based on it. So it's kind of like it gives them kind of mixed message because they're trying to turn around and using a Durango landscape architect, and they're using, so I started seeing where some of the conflict came because some of the plant material was on the recommended list, and yet it probably is not appropriate. And then we have the list from the River Trust that was put together, do and don't. Well, there's some that say don't use in the river corridor that show up as a recommended in the city list. And so we get, I mean, they have white mulberry, and it says it's a recommended, and yet fruitless mulberry is not. That's the same plant. And so we've got some conflict. So I think as we get into these higher profile, I think it would be real beneficial to sit there and to really I don't know where it's done at the city or something, but I think we're going to have to be real careful with these diseases. It would almost make more sense that you referred it back to county extension or somebody who's keeping up with some of the diseases and some of the changes. So again, the linden was kind of the big, and you have a big block of dogwoods.
Right.
In plant material class, you can't find a dogwood in Oklahoma City other than maybe one in Will Rogers Park and all. So you turn around, and I don't know what that substitution is, but I would be open, and if you need to go back to Scotty or something, but I would be open on a couple of those species. 90% of it looks great, or 99%, 95%, but it would be a shame to sit there because that's where somebody will focus. So,
Understood.
Anyway, I think it's a good plan. I think it's a great layout, and I do see where some of the conflict ended up, where they were picking up plant material to use that really probably should not still be on the city list.
Thank you, Brian. Sounds like the city list needs updating.
Yeah, we'd like to work with you on that so we can upgrade it or make some changes to either or both of those. I'll contact you after the meeting, and we'll see if we can set up some time.
And I think part of the danger is there's two ways to look at a list. You either take everything in the world like a Hortus 3 and say, well, I've seen one in Will Rogers Park and I've seen one here. That's kind of what this list is. It's this huge comprehensive. Or you sit there and you say, it's not that we couldn't maybe make one live at the zoo if we were determined to, but I think what you need to sit there on this type of thing, watching out for the public's money and all, I think we need to sit there and say, what are the best practices, what are some of those, and then let them ask for an exception rather than throw it into the approved in a comprehensive. I think that's where you kind of get yourself into problems. So anyway, I really appreciate what you all did, and I think it's a great project. I think it would be good, but I would be a little open, especially on that linden and the cattle maple, maybe make sure they're on a slope. Because.
Thank you, Brian. Any other comments?
Not that it might be your question to answer, but who maintains this once it's installed? Who is the group that will ultimately be responsible for whether these plants continue and are replaced if they meet a demise? Is there a plan in place, or is that the city, or who maintains
I can answer, and the city can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an operational agreement with a private entity, most likely the Boathouse Foundation. Once the project is turned over, all maintenance and operation is on that private entity.
Yeah, and a little bit of that is there's a year guarantee, and like I said, it doesn't mean that all those plans would die in a year. I mean, that's what Myriad's up against right now on some of that, is some of it, you still hang on to one. But again, I think you've got a good, solid one, and I think some of the changes were really solid. But we could even have a plant material or two between now and then that ends up into a big disease problem. So to me, the litmus test is going back to county extension and just saying, is there something there that we need to be aware of?
Well, we're going to bid within the next few weeks on this project, hopefully, and we're certainly willing to make those accommodations.
I think there will be some questions, and I would be open to the questions. I think some people are going to look at the lindens and are going to say, we're not real comfortable on that. Would you accept the substitution? And I would definitely take those for consideration and weigh them out through county extension and make sure that they're appropriate through the city. But I would be, because again, at the end of the day, we all want to hit a grand slam.
Ryan, would you be open to, if they do have some substitutions, if they'll let me know, me contacting you and giving you the plant material they're offering to substitute?
I'd be happy to. And again, I would also go to Ray at County Extension, just because he's up on those day-to-day. We heard the other day about a couple of new diseases that were cropping up on a couple of plants, and the thing is, he's going to have already gotten 100 phone calls, and so and we just want to steer.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's science. So, thank you. Yes, I would.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make the motion for approval.
Okay, motion by Mr. Doherty, seconded by Mr. Yost. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming back. Next item of business is item 7A, other business, proposed ordinance amendments. Scotty, would you like to walk us through those?
The majority of this is just some cleanup to clarify some of the items in the ordinance. We have realigned the membership slightly because we asked that 3 members be appointed from the River Trust. That's going to present a burden to us when we rotate off, so we would like to have a bigger pool to choose from, so we've eliminated one of those members so that we'll have a different member to select from as each one of you rotates off. We've cleaned up some of the voting procedures and the submittal process. We now have taken that full lengthy item out of our ordinance that says what it needs to be submitted for an application, and combine it into a one document that they can obtain at the planning department. We've modified the bulk standards. We did not exempt accessory structures. We're now exempting those from setback and height requirements. We've modified some of the parking regulations slightly to tighten them up, where we had instances where we have projects at front on the street and the river. So we've clarified those to try to address that issue. And like I said, most of it is just how we submit things, how we apply things, and clarifying the language in the existing ordinance amendments right now.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any comments? I obviously read through them, and I didn't find anything that was glaring.
You know, the question that I had was on when it talks about applications, I guess it's 4250.8C, and it really simplified the way the application was, or it just says applications and certificate of approval shall be submitted to the planning department. Sufficient information and details shall be submitted to allow full evaluation. In the past, you've listed exactly where everything is on those. Is that information going to be very similar to what it is now?
Yes, we have a packet that walks them through the process itself with the application form. We have a list of drawings that are required, and it's in a 3-page packet rather than having to look through the whole ordinance looking for that information.
Okay, that's what I figured.
I got a question about the membership of the committee. I don't know that it's a change from before, but it talks about 2 members shall be appointed, okay, and then at least 7 members should be persons with knowledge or experience in the profession or practice of architecture, landscape architecture, planning, urban, okay, anyway. I think that we lean pretty heavily on this committee sometimes on the architects that are on the board or on the committee, and this language here is kind of so loose that I think about anybody could say that they have knowledge or experience in the profession or practice of architecture. I mean, on some of the other ones, could we say that we want at least one licensed architect?
We could say that. They are screened. Any applications to sit on committee members are screened by staff and by the mayor before they're appointed.
That's a pretty, you're a licensed architect or you're not. It would take a lot of subjectivity out of it.
Is that just the architect you want to license? What about any of the other members?
Yeah, I can see where we wouldn't want to get too it seems like we've always had a civil engineer on, but I think that and then landscape, I think if we said we wanted a licensed landscape architect, that might be too prohibitive, don't you think?
Connie's on the downtown design. She's licensed. I'm licensed. There's a number of licensed landscape architects that could. I don't know, and I don't know whether you could say, of the licensed, professional, we want at least 2 licensed people and leave it a little open where it could be a civil engineer. There could be 2, and it could be a civil engineer and an architect, or a landscape architect and an architect, or I see your point on that, is trying to...
Well, we only have 8 people on the committee, and if 7 of them have to be licensed.
No, he meant the other way.
They just have to be knowledge or have some experience in, and that's why we rely on their resumes to determine that. It's a little difficult to find people who are in the profession, actively in the profession, that have the time to devote to these. So we look to somebody who might be retired, no longer is licensed, but has the experience. that would knock them out of the running. So I can certainly add that if you'd like for me to. But I caution you that it might make our pool a little iffy.
What do you think, Tony?
I think that there is a benefit to having some licensed professionals.
Okay.
I think that it's a benefit to have a licensed architect, licensed engineer, licensed landscape architect. Maybe the compromise is that you identify that a certain percentage of the group is required to hold a license, and maybe not specifically it has to be an architect. I mean, staff is going to, maybe staff needs some guidelines on how to pursue and understand the intent better, and then say that it's maybe 2 or 3 licenses are necessary, but that you have the latitude to pull that from the different groups.
Right.
Because you wouldn't want to hold it up if there wasn't an architect that was available, and so you held up a person who was maybe completely, I mean, there are people who do not hold a license who have been in the architectural profession for a very long time, and would be entirely appropriate for this board. You wouldn't want to push them off if you actually said architect, but you probably do, I think, want at least 2 or 3 professional licenses on the committee.
Okay.
Well, what about
You
if-
have your mic on.
Oh, I'm looking away from it.
Okay. I'm sorry. I captured everything. I'm not sure the tape did. So the
How about the staff has latitude,
Okay.
and that the staff has the intent and understands what you're trying to get, and you're pursuing licensed architects, and you're pursuing engineers, and you're pursuing landscape architects.
Right.
But the actual requirement is that it is 2 or 3 licensed professionals on the committee, and not specifically a licensed architect, licensed engineer, because you might get a person who is 4 decades of experience in architecture and far more valuable on this committee, but just does not happen to have a license.
okay.
And I don't think that that'll come into play with respect to structural. It might come into play with respect to landscape. A person who has been in the business forever but just does not happen to have a license. But when it comes to engineers, I think it's cut and dry. I think it needs a license. Either you're a licensed engineer or you're not.
What about if we said of the disciplines that represent this, that there would be at least 2 that would be licensed? If we did that, it would kind of, because that could be civil engineer, that could be structural, that could be architecture, that could be landscape architecture. Right now, we have at least 3 that are sitting on it, and I guess if
Well,
we
plus
could...
Kenny is licensed.
Yes,
So
he is.
so we have 4 right now.
So,
Or is it
you-
5?
I don't know.
Is he the engineer?
Is Don an engineer?
I don't believe so.
But if we did do 2, that still gives a nice representation, and we don't have it specific to a discipline. We say of the professions that are there, 2 are licensed.
I think in that regard, though, that staff is looking for a person who can complement that in the absence. So if you have a civil engineer and you have a landscape architect, and those are holding your 2 licensed positions on the committee, you're still pursuing somebody who has sufficient architectural background you're looking for somebody who can actually fill that role, supplementing the licensed professionals.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that. That would be the ideal, but these are volunteer positions, and if we would start specifying licensed professionals being the only people that could serve in certain positions, it might be hard to fill those positions, and you might not get the best person. There's no such thing as a licensed land developer in Oklahoma, but there's an awful lot of good ones that have had many, many years of experience, and I think that's true probably of some of the other professions we're talking about.
How many seats on the committee? Is there 8?
9.
9, according
So what we would be saying is 2 of the 9 would hold something, and the other 7 would round it out. And you're not tying it to any specific license, you're just saying 2 of the 9 hold some sort of professional something.
Yeah, design professional. We don't want hairdressers taking one of those 2 spots.
Or you could have
Don't
8
like
lawyers.
hairdressers?
They could have one of the other 7.
Okay, so where, time-wise, is this something where that language can be modified and then bring it back, or what?
We're on a pretty tight schedule because we can see that the rotation is looming up quickly. Would it be acceptable to you for us to make those changes and forward that information to you via email
Okay.
so that we can keep the momentum going on the,
So then you need a recommendation of approval from us subject to those changes?
yes.
Anyone care to make a motion?
I make the motion.
Mr. Doherty made a motion. Seconded by Mr. Joyce. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. So, next item, 8, communications. 8A, administrative approval report. We have 2 items, SRCA-12-0002 at 1925 Southwest 15th Street. And item 2 is SRCA-13-0011 at 210 South Ellison Avenue. Does anyone have any comments on either of those? If not, next item, comments from the planning staff.
None?
Any comments from the committee members?
I'd just like to comment that I really appreciate the time and effort Brian puts into some of these issues that involve landscaping, because it does take time. He's busy. I've worked with Brian on projects that have nothing to do with our committee, and I know how busy he is, and I really appreciate that, and I want to commend him for it.
Thank you, Brian, very much. Appreciate that. The next meeting date is Thursday, April the 3rd. As far as I understand from Scotty, there's nothing on the agenda as of yet.
That's correct. We will not have a meeting unless something comes up that we need to bring back to you.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Mr. Blatt, second. Mr. Yost, all those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.